नमस्कार दोस्तों और जय हिंद। आप सभी को स्वागत है इन माय चैनल 1971 वॉर बुक सीरीज। तो दोस्तों, you have seen the entire episode series of Paunchy's war where he has talked about his movement and his battalion's movement up to Ashuganj. In the next part of this video, he is going to talk about the glorious Meghna Helibridge crossing. The crossing of the entire Meghna River on board helicopters, Indian Airforce के helicopters, to resume their advance towards Dhaka by getting to Raipura on the other side of the Meghna River and then closing on to Narsingdi, and from Narsingdi se they start their advance towards Dhaka. This entire journey will be explained by Major Chandrakant Singh in our program today, and how he personally took part in this operation, being in the first helicopter to cross the Meghna River in the Bangladesh Liberation War of 1971. Let's welcome Major Chandrakant Singh Veer Chakra to our program today.
I have my evening sundowner, and as there's a saying, old soldiers never die.
Absolutely.
They just fade away. Well, I would like to add to that. Old soldiers never die. They just fade away, having an evening sundowner and reminiscing about times gone by. Cheers.
Cheers.
And a happy evening to you, son.
And cheers to victory.
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 Cheers. God bless you and God bless our country.
Thank you, sir.
On the 8th of December evening, we had occupied Ashuganj, my battalion, 4 guards. Now, there our advance came to a halt.
Okay.
Ashuganj is on the east bank of the Meghna River. On the western bank is Bharat Bazaar, large in town. And between the two of us, Bharat Bazaar and Ashuganj, is the wide, mighty Meghna River.
Right.
Which is called in Bangladesh as the Ganga of the East.
Right.
Joining the two is the Coronation Bridge. It's about 2 kilometers long. We were poor, bloody infantry, marching on our own 2 feet, carrying our heavy rucksacks, rifles, ammunition, and other equipment on our backs. There was no way that we could cross the river. There was no way that we could cross the river on the bridge, because on the opposite side was the Pakistan 14 Infantry Brigade, commanded by Major General Abdul Majid, with a whole brigade with him. Pakistan 27 Brigade, commanded by Brigadier Saidullah, in total of 6,000 troops. And there are 600 of us here on the eastern bank. You can't just walk across the bridge on a single file.
Right.
And there was no way that an infantryman loaded with about 30 to 40 kilos of equipment, arms and ammunition, could swim across the river.
Right.
We had no bridging equipment. We had no boats.
And it was a huge river.
It's a mighty river. Now, at Ashuganj, it's at the narrowest stretch, about 2 kilometers wide. As you go further south, it becomes 16 kilometers wide. It's like an ocean. You cannot see the further bank. At Ashuganj, the most prominent building was a 200 or 300 foot high grain silo to
Okay.
store grain, which had been built with the American aid.
Okay.
And the Pakistanis had an artillery observation post on top of the silo, so you could see for 10 to 15 miles around. And during the course of our advance to Brahmanbaria to Ashuganj, he had brought down quite a bit of enemy fire on us.
Okay.
We had tried to neutralize him with tank fire. It didn't work. We even tried, and I think it partly succeeded because then the shelling stopped. Got a strike by the Air Force on the building. They fired, a couple of MiGs came. They fired 2 or 3 rockets on the building. Really didn't do very much damage. But I think the enemy Pakistani artillery officer got frightened and ran away from it.
Okay.
We harbored for the night in Ashuganj. But that is when I say we, it is my battalion, 4th Battalion, Brigade of the Guards, Old 1st Rajputs. An odd incident happened here. In the evening, the battalion headquarters was located in a masjid in Ashuganj.
Okay.
The reason why it was located in the Ashuganj was that we thought that the Pakistani artillery would not bring down artillery fire on the masjid.
Okay.
It was a very big masjid. And that happened to be a big building, so we and located at the right spot. We put the CEO decided to put the battalion headquarters there. Putting the battalion headquarters in the masjid was not an act of vengeance or something to desecrate the thing, but it was the most convenient and tactically correct place to have the battalion headquarters because it was centrally located.
Okay.
In the evening, and our companies were dispersed. Shami Mehta with his tanks was with my company, plus I think a couple of troops was elsewhere. I get a message from this commanding officer, then Colonel Himmat Singh, that I'm required to attend a battalion conference
Okay.
at the battalion headquarters. So as soon as it got dark, or just dusk, I walked to the battalion headquarters, which is about a kilometer from my battalion, and there met the battalion commander and the other company commanders. To our good fortune, by then our road communications from Agartala to Brahmanbaria, Akora, Brahmanbaria and Ashuganj had been opened up, and our mess detachment had also turned up
Okay.
with food and also a couple of bottles of whiskey.
Acha.
So after 12 days of fighting, this is the first drink that we had there.
And heavy fighting, I guess. Heavy fighting.
Heavy fighting, it suffered a lot of casualties. Even in Ashuganj, we had suffered things, and I'll tell you about them just now. In the evening, we got together, and the battalion commander said that we haven't received orders for our subsequent actions. But he has been called back to Brahmanbaria to meet the brigade commander early next morning. And I was the senior most officer next to him. He told me, Paunchy, take charge of the battalion in the morning after I leave and see that everything is okay. Because we are in contact with the enemy, we are exchanging fire with the enemy. So to be left as a 29-year-old man for even a short while in command of a battalion in the midst of a war is a privilege which is granted to very few.
Right.
It's a heady experience and a heady
And
feeling.
it's a sudden experience. Sudden as
Yes.
well. Yeah.
We had dinner there, warm dinner, and a warm dinner is not only for the officers, even our men were, because our supply lines had opened up, they got their first or second meal in the war, a warm, properly cooked meal. Otherwise, we were living on shakkar paras, roast chanas, and whatever we could scrounge and make do. After the briefing for the next day was over, dinner was over and our drinks were over, I returned to my to my company headquarters.
Okay.
There I was met with my senior JCO, Subedar Makhan Singh. Makhan Lal, sorry.
Makanla.
It's now almost 55 years ago and I'm an old man, my memory is trick. He tells me, sir, those two engineer boys from the engineer regiment who are attached to our company, they have gone missing. I cannot find them.
Okay.
And his thing was that he thought that they had run away. They had had enough of fighting. I said, why do you think that they run away? He said, while you were away, we were digging our trenches
Gotcha.
and they dug a trench just next to your trench. I fired them up. I told them this is not the place, too close to the company commander's trench. You move it, 20 steps, 10, 20 meters away from the trench, because it's normal tactics not to bunch up and crowd together, because if one shell explodes, you get a whole bunch. So you disperse yourselves so that you offer a smaller target to the enemy.
Okay.
It was dark by then, I think 9 p.m. And we looked around for the men. These two engineer boys who were attached to us, we couldn't find them.
Okay.
Well, it did disturb us, that two men have run away, even if they're from not my battalion, they're attached to us. In the morning, when there was light, now during this time when I was away, what had happened was that our positions had been shelled by the Pakistani artillery.
Okay.
In the morning, we discovered, when there was a bit of light, early dawn, that a shell had fallen into the trench
Gotcha.
where these engineer boys had dug a trench.
The entire
They'd
thing
been-
must have exploded. Entire place.
The shell had exploded inside. They were blown into smithereens, and their bodies were hanging in small bits and pieces on the tree above.
Horrific.
After that, this is at about, say, 6 o'clock in the morning, I did a round of not only my company position, but also the rest of the battalion. At about 9 o'clock, by then my commanding officer, Colonel Himmat Singh, had gone back to Brown Bayou. I did not know what he had gone for, but I knew that he had gone there to meet the brigade commander and receive orders for our further operations.
Okay.
At about 9 o'clock, not 9 o'clock, I think it's later, I think about 10 o'clock or 10:30, I get a message on the radio from him. Chandrakant, well, Paunchy, that's what I was known as, because we were using our pet names or nicknames as call signs to fox the enemy, you wouldn't know. For instance, Colonel Himmat Singh was just called Himmat, adjutant Major Captain Devan. He was nice and round, or we call him robust. We used to call him glucose. We looked at a glucose baby.
Okay.
So we had these pet names in the whole division. Bring the battalion back to Brahmanbaria.
Acha.
I said, sir, we are in contact with the enemy. We are exchanging fire. Whom do I hand over the positions of the battalion to so that we can withdraw? Remember, when you are in contact with the enemy, it is the military doctrine that withdrawing from the enemy when you are in contact with him is a very difficult operation unless somebody takes you over. He says, don't worry. The other two battalions of the brigade, 18 Rajputs and 10 Bihar, are moving in fast, and they will occupy your positions, our positions. But you bring the battalion post haste back to
Acha.
Brahmanbaria, which is about 12 miles further southeast of us.
Okay.
So I passed the order to the company commanders that assemble the battalion, and by 11 or 11:30, we assembled the battalion and started marching back to Brahmanbaria. By then, there was no sign of 18 Rajputs or 10 Bihar who were to release us.
Acha.
For whatever reason, they took a lot longer to arrive at Ashuganj than perhaps our brigade commander or others anticipated. But what happened was the Pakistanis observed our withdrawal, and they also observed 18 Rajputs and 10 Bihar advancing across open country into Ashuganj.
Okay.
Realizing that we had vacated Ashuganj, the Pakistan 27 Infantry Brigade, which had crossed over to the western bank of the Meghna, recrossed it and reoccupied Ashuganj.
So it's a tactical mistake, but
Well, I won't say a mistake. See, these are decisions taken at the spur of the moment. And the higher commanders have their own priorities.
okay.
Now, Brigadier Saidullah, the commander of 27 Pakistani Infantry Brigade, after the war, when he was captured, he was interrogated as a prisoner of war. That report is with us. I will make that a report available to you. He was interrogated by Brigadier Baba, who was the commander of our own 57 Mountain Artillery Brigade commander. In that, he says that when he reoccupied Ashuganj, he was surprised that my battalion, 4 guards, had occupied Ashuganj at night and had vacated the position.
Okay.
Now, finding Ashuganj vacated by us, they occupied it, and 18 Rajputs and 10 Bihar, not realizing that the Pakistanis have reoccupied Ashuganj, stumbled into it.
They must have been.
Both the battalions suffered very heavy casualties. CO 18 Rajputs, Colonel Ashok Verma, later Major General Ashok Verma, has written about this in the book that he's written. I think the title of the book is Rivers of Sorrow or something like that. I forget the title of the book, but I have it with me. I think they suffered about 250 casualties and were forced to withdraw.
Another thing, sir, I would like to ask that when you were vacating, did the Indian Army didn't have any intelligence that these bad guys were crossing back? Pakistanis were crossing back?
See, these things that it is those days. Okay, remember there was no satellite observation. We had no aerial, reconnaissance taking place at that time. So we really didn't have information at all.
Right.
Real-time information was not available.
Okay.
And these are fast-moving battles. And the troops and the formation that disperse, so things are happening, this is fog of war, what we call it. And there was a lot of heartburn between the battalion commanders and the brigade commander and the senior commanders because of the fiasco. I'll call it fiasco. I'm not exaggerating. Well, fiasco I think is the wrong word, but I would say a temporary setback that we had at Ashuganj. The two battalions, 18 Rajputs and 10 Bihar had. As far as I'm concerned, the story of Ashuganj is over now. The Pakistanis sort of withdrew again from Ashuganj. But at Ashuganj, during this course of action with 18 Rajputs, Shammi Mehta's squadron also suffered some casualties. 4 of his tanks were fired upon and destroyed. A couple of men died. One of his troop commanders, Lieutenant Mohan, was seriously wounded. And so I would say that this was a bit of quite a setback for us. But this whole operation was to serve the purposes of our higher commanders. And Ashuganj had become a sideshow for them. It took me 3 or 4 hours to bring the battalion back to Ashuganj. I was told to bring the battalion to the Badia Stadium. It was hardly a stadium, it was just a 4-foot wall around the open ground with a couple of steps, step seating for the spectators. When I went there, I met the battalion commander. The brigade commander was there. I asked him, I think I got there at about something 12:30 or 1 o'clock. Yeah. So after meeting him, I asked him, so what do we do now? He says, Paunchy, we are going to cross the Meghna. I said, no way, sir. He said, the corps commander General Sagat wants us to cross the Meghna. I said, sir, I know the corps commander has immense faith in our battalion and trust in our battalion to do anything. But there is no way that my men can swim across 2 miles or 3 kilometers laden with the equipment across the Meghna. He said, Paunchy, we are not swimming across the river. We are getting helicopters to cross it.
Okay. This was something
General
new, I guess.
Himmat in his after-action report, which is available on audio tape, actually mentions this incident. I tell him that we can't cross the river even if Sagat wants us to do it. And then I told that we are crossing the river by helicopters. I said, sir, that's a different thing. So I said, sir, when does the operation start? When do we take off? He says, at 4 o'clock in the evening. Now it's already 1 o'clock. We have 3 hours to prepare for a heliborne operation, which we had never done before. Although some of us had some experience of helicopters, but none of our men had to do. You have to work out the modus operandi of the operation in 3 to 4 hours, 3 hours actually. Who goes in which helicopter? Which arms and ammunition go in which helicopter? We had some civilian Bengali porters with us to carry our extra ammunition because we are operating behind enemy lines. How do we distribute them? It's a logistical, I won't call it nightmare, but it's a tough logistical exercise. But we managed to do it. At about 4 o'clock, the helicopters that were to take us across start landing. I was told by my commanding officer that there will be a total of 12 helicopters.
Okay.
A squadron that were of 110 helicopter unit or helicopter squadron, commanded by squadron leader Channi Sandhu,
Right.
with Flight Lieutenant Pushpred being one of the flight commanders.
Right.
The helicopter started landing. Now, before this, at the stadium or the helipad now, we started calling it the helipad or the landing ground. The senior Air Force commander, that time Group Captain Chandan Singh, later Air Vice Marshal Chandan Singh, Mahavir Chakra, Veer Chakra, Ati Vishesya Medal.
Though he
one of the
started
greatest,
from the cavalry, I guess. He started
yes,
his career from the
from the
cavalry.
Jodhpur Lancers, whose biography I've written.
Right, right.
That's the first time I met him. So I asked him, sir, how many men can we load in each helicopter? He said 16 to 17. Now, I had some experience with the helicopters. I said, sir, these Mi-4 helicopters can take in a load of only 10 men. How do we load up 16 to 17 men with their arms and ammunition? He said, son, the stadium is quite long. It's almost 150 meters long. The helicopters, which are meant to take off vertically, need not take off vertically.
Okay.
Like an aircraft, they can have a little run.
Acha.
Like a takeoff helicopter, it takes off the aircraft, a fixed wing aircraft. Starts slowly
Like
moving
this,
forward
yeah.
and then gradually builds up speed and lift. So here the helicopters will be able to have like an aircraft on the runway, have about 100-meter run in the stadium, building up speed and increasing the lift. And after about 75 to 100 meters, they would have got enough power and lift to then take off in it. So they'll be able to carry a much higher load than what they're designed for.
Okay.
And that is what happened. At 4:30, we start. My company, my CEO told me that my company would be the first to cross. 4 helicopters under Flight Lieutenant Pushpred arrived. They landed. One platoon of mine with the company headquarters got into this aircraft. In the first helicopter, I was there. With me, at the last moment, my CEO Colonel Himmat Singh jumped in.
Acha.
And in one corner, we saw Group Captain Chandan Singh also sitting. Now, there are no seats, you're sitting on the floor. The rear boom doors of the helicopters had been removed to lighten the weight and also to facilitate getting in and getting out. And we took off. the flight with a helicopter in the front. After about 5 minutes, we were joined by two of our NAT fighters
Okay.
who were to escort us,
Right, right.
to give us protection in case there was enemy where we were landing. They came very close to us,
Acha.
and you could see the pilots, the faces hidden behind the thing, and they
That's
could
like
see
great
us.
sight, sir.
That is a great sight. It was one of those John Wayne moments
Yeah.
uh, you see in movies. Down below us was the ocean like Meghna.
Yeah.
We were flying about 1,000 feet above it, water, and these
Yeah.
on our own Air Force planes. Thing. And the best part was later on we came to know that the squadron commander who was flying one of the NATs was squadron leader Manmohan Singh.
Okay.
Later on, Air Marshal Manmohan Singh. He was the elder brother of a regimental officer of mine, who later on became a Lieutenant General, J.M. Singh.
Acha, acha, acha.
J.M. Singh had been my own company commander when I joined the battalion. But that's something later. It only shows as to how connected we all are. We landed at a place called Raipura on the further bank of the Meghna River. Now, Raipura had been selected as the landing ground by General Sagat Singh the day before. He had gone on a reconnaissance, and in the morning he had taken my commanding officer also on a reconnaissance. In the morning's reconnaissance, while they were carrying out a reconnaissance, General Sagat Singh's helicopter, piloted by Captain Sehota, later Lieutenant General Sehota, was shot at. A bullet grazed the forehead of Lieutenant General Sagat Singh. Another bullet passed through the beret of the brigade commander, Brigadier R.N. Mishra.
Okay.
Lucky that they were not shot.
He was also hit. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. But we all well, that ends well. We landed at Raipura just as it was getting dark. No enemy. My CEO said, Chandrakant, secure the helipad. So the troops that I had with me, a platoon's worth, I deployed them around the landing helipad. There was no helipad, just a landing zone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this place, Raipura, was about 12 to 14 kilometers south of Brahmanbaria where the enemy was. It was out of artillery range.
Okay.
And it would have taken the enemy a long time to interfere with our landing. Because if we had to move his down troop, it would take him 4 or 5 hours, by which time our landing would be complete and we would be ready to face the enemy. But our objective was actually a place called Narsingdi, a railway station on the railway station, and not Narsingdi, sorry. Was it Narsingdi? Methikanda, sorry. Methikanda railway station. Narsingdi was subsequent days. Which is a railway station, and on the road from Brahmanbaria to Narsingdi and then on to Dhaka.
Okay. Another question, sir, I had. These drop zones where the helicopters were landing, were they secured beforehand or just
No.
empty grounds?
When it was empty ground, we secured it, the first two.
The first people
The platoon secured it.
You.
After we secured it, and the second flight started landing, carrying another 30 or 40 troops, my commanding officer said, Chandrakant, or Paunchy, take a couple of men with you, with your radio operator, and go to Methikanda and carry out a reconnaissance there, so that the battalion can move there and build up at that, because that was our objective. I started moving. I was supposed to be going, well, not quite secretly, but trying to be as secretive as possible, not to be observed and fired upon by the enemy, because I just had my wireless operator and two other men with me. But the local villagers spotted us. And you're a Bengali, the family is from East Bengal. Collecting a crowd in Bengal is no big deal. The local villagers had seen our helicopters flying and land, and before I knew it, hundreds and thousands of them had collected. They just picked me and my men up on their shoulders. How those scrawny, small, thin-legged Bengalis could, pick up a fat Indian, I don't know, but they did it. And the crowd started shouting, and you Bengalis are noisy, Joy Bangla, Joy India, Joy Indira Gandhi, all sort of things. And we moved, our cavalcade or crowd moved towards the Meghna railway station. There was a platoon of Pakistani at Meghna. Hearing this roar of thousands of Bengalis, they decided that it would be wiser to leave Meghna. They also had certain...
the local population is so much loving for you while you are not their army. You know that victory is there.
Yes,
coming. Yeah.
So what they did was, the Pakistanis piled up, there was a couple of railway wagons, empty wagons lying there. They piled up all their equipment in that, got hold of a few Bengalis and started pushing the railway wagon towards Narsingdi and Meghna, southwestwards.
Okay.
When I got to Meghna, I saw the last of the wagons, a fleeting glance of it. I fired a burst from my Sten gun to speed them on the way. And we occupied Meghna railway station literally without firing a shot, without facing any opposition.
Okay.
Now, as per the plan, the rest of the battalion, I'd just gone with 4 or 5 men. My CEO had said that after about an hour, once he had built up with more men, he will send my company and another company to join me at Meghna. Things did not go as planned, which in war they rarely do. The company that was to, the troops that were to join me were that time commanded by Captain Surinder Singh, because the company commander, Major Uppal, had been wounded earlier at Raipura. And he made the mistake, Surinder, of instead of relying, because by then it was dark, on his compass and map, he relied on a local guide, who instead of bringing them to Meghna, took them to Bhaira Bazaar where the enemy division was. Now, I was most worried.
I guess directly, Pakistani GOC.
Yes. And I was very worried because my company was not with me. We had been trying to observe radio silence, not to let the enemy know, too much of details of our movement and situation. During this time, we had a short encounter which could have turned very nasty with a group of Urdu-speaking Mukti Bahani.
Okay.
They were actually the Mukti Bahani, they were people from the Pakistan Navy. It was a group. so they could speak Urdu.
Okay.
So we had a very few tense moments. I could not make out whether they were Pakistanis
Mm-hmm.
troops. That's what I thought because they could speak Urdu, and they were not too sure whether we were Indians or Pakistani soldiers.
Asha.
It was a bit of a few minutes of very, very tense time. But all well, I think after some time, both of us were able to establish our identities. And by the morning, we were joined by the rest of my battalion at Metikanda, deployed. Surinder had gone with my 2 platoons of my company and his company, Delta Company, to Bhair Bazaar, also returned. But at Bhair Bazaar, he had come under enemy fire and we lost 5 or 6 men. They were saying in the army, there is nothing more dangerous than a young officer with a map. In this case, Surinder should have relied more on the map rather than a local guide. Maps don't lie.
Right.
Everything very well. Morning came, light came, and about 11 o'clock, a helicopter landed at Metikanda on the roof of a school building, in which there was the divisional commander, Jimmy Gondalves, and Brigadier Mishra. From somewhere they had collected a whole 4 or 5 baskets of oranges for us. They were most welcome. But we were a little hungry. Puris would have been more welcome.
Okay.
But that apart, we were told that next day we would have to advance towards Narsingdi. Narsingdi is a large industrial town. It is about 30 kilometers from Bhair Bazaar, so from us it was about 20-25 kilometers along the railway line. But the same day, we did send our patrol out towards Narsingdi to the point of the way, and we got a report that there were no Pakistani on the way. We spent that day and the night at Metikanda. Nothing happened. We were able to rest and organize ourselves. And besides oranges, another very welcome thing was we got batteries for our radios.
Okay.
Those days the radio sets were very bulky and they had big radio batteries also. These didn't have a long life. So replenishment of batteries was actually a bit of a logistical problem. Colonel Jacob also in his book biography writes about this. Batteries were heavy, bulky, and we didn't have them in adequate numbers. But fortunately we got them, and that's the big headache that was removed. Now all this is happening. We took off. We reached Ashuganj on the 8th evening. 9th is when the helicopter took off and we crossed the river. 10th is when the oranges and the batteries arrived at Metikanda. And 11th we resumed our advance towards Narsingdi, which is a large industrial town.
Yeah.
There were a few Pakistanis there. Most of them had evacuated and run away when they saw our troops advancing. But a few elements were.
Okay.
We occupied most of Narsingdi. Our biggest catch, reward was the bus stand.
Narsingdi bus stand.
Bus stand. Because here we got hold of quite a few bus stands, including a couple of fire engines, was it a thing, and a couple of trucks with adequate supplies of diesel from a jute mill.
Okay.
So here now we became, one, there was the road, and now we are transport, we are mobile.
Right.
This is 11th evening.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said earlier, that there were some elements of the Pakistani troops who had remained behind in Narsingdi.
Okay.
And by now it was nightfall and they were firing us. I was told by my commanding officer to clear the Pakistani troops from wherever they were.
Gotcha.
Those days we didn't have any night observing, devices or any such thing. And which house the fire is coming from, it's something that's a difficult thing. Fighting in built-up areas is a very, very difficult thing. It's the most difficult thing. The Russians have realized it. Well, they realized it in the Second World War, and so did the Germans. But the same thing has been repeated in Ukraine and the Israelis in the Gaza Strip and in Lebanon.
Right.
They're suffering casualties, both the sides. And look at the destruction that has taken on place over a year. And for advances, which are just 5 to 10 kilometers.
And the enemy can resort to guerrilla tactics as well.
Yes, that is it. I will describe what happened in Narsingdi that night, because I was wounded that night.
Gotcha.
5 or 6 of my men were killed.
How did that
A second
happen, sir?
helicopter,
I mean,
a second helicopter operation took place also at Narsingdi,
Okay.
and the next day, the further advance. We'll talk of that during our next meeting.
Okay, sir. And one more thing, sir.
We-
Next day, also, I would like to know a bit about how you were wounded in battle.
We'll talk of that.
Mm-hmm.
My Prem Kahani, as I call it, we'll talk of it tomorrow.